understand how money works, and everybody else does not. And I'll tell you where I came to this conclusion. I checked all the boxes. I studied hard in school. I went through high school. I went to college. I spent 1 year in graduate school. And then I went through law school. But I never once learned a thing about money. I never once learned a thing about building wealth. I never once learned a thing about investing. I never once learned a thing about passive income. But if you look at the wealthiest people in the world, they don't get there by working a job and getting a raise. They don't get there by working to climb the corporate ladder. They get there because they understand how money works. And they understand how to win in that economic system. And the crazy thing about that is we're all taught to trust the system. My parents are immigrants from a state in India called Punjab. And like many other traditional Indian immigrants, they wanted me to become successful. Now in my house, that definition of success was very simple. They gave me two options.
I can guess.
Well, option number one was, Jasprit, you can be a doctor.
Yeah.
Option two was, Jasprit, you can be a failure.
Okay.
And they said they get to pick which one. And this is me when I'm like 1 year old. That since the day I could start talking, my parents told everybody, not just people around us, they called my family in India, my family all around the country, that Jasprit is going to grow up and become a doctor because he's going to become successful. Now, I had nothing against that because I wanted to become successful too. I saw how hard my parents worked. My dad, if he got a Saturday and a Sunday off, it was considered a long weekend. I mean, my parents bust their butt, and I wanted to become successful so I could give back to them. And they told me that if I wanted to become successful, the way I do that is by becoming a doctor, which makes sense because when you're in school, you get those like pamphlets, those career pamphlets, and they show you the different career options you have. And anytime you look at that, the top of the list is always doctor. And so they said, Jasprit, if you want to become successful, you have to become a doctor. And because we came to this country, you have to become successful, so you have to become a doctor. Now, I didn't think anything wrong with it because I liked the idea of becoming successful, so I went down that path. Now, along the way, I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. I told my parents that I'm not going to be a doctor. My mom almost had a heart attack. My dad couldn't believe it. And so my dad essentially told me that Jasprit, if you want to keep any pride in the family, you have to at least become an attorney. So I said, okay. I went to law school part-time, worked on my business full-time. Now, today I am a licensed attorney, but I've never worked a day as an attorney. And the reason why I've never worked as an attorney is because it's just not worth my time and it's not where my passion is. And along that way, that's when I learned that we're taught, this is how you win. Go to school, study hard, get good grades, get a good job. And if you continue working down that path, you're going to become successful. But if you look at the successful people, that's not the path that they followed. And if we take a look at the three things that have built more wealth than anything else over the last century, it's starting a business, investing in real estate, and investing in stocks. Yet, along my entire educational path, I was never taught that. We're focused on how do you get a good job, but all wealthy people are focused on is how do I grow my assets? And that's the key difference here, is wealthy people are working to own the corporate ladder. Everybody else is working to climb the corporate ladder. And then the next thing, I'm going to go back to what you said, assuming that you don't have rich parents, because most people assume that you have to be rich in order to do this. You need millions of dollars. You need access to all this money. But that's not true. You can start now with $100, $10, but you have to get started. The problem is most of us are never taught how to do this. But unless you start doing this, you're never going to build wealth. And that's the way that you win in this economic system.
So I want to go through all of those three things you've just said. I want to talk about starting businesses, I want to talk about investing in stocks, and also want to talk about real estate. But I'm curious in your own personal story there, when did the penny drop? Because it's so interesting. In my life, there's key moments where I got to see behind the curtain. And when I say see behind the curtain, I'll refer to my friends when we're speaking privately, I'll refer to it as money games. Like the day where I saw these billionaires playing money games that I didn't know existed. And I was there working my butt off, working in call centers or building whatever. And then I got to meet a billionaire, got to spend time with them, got to see behind the curtain, and was like, oh, they just play these money games, which nobody else has been told about.
Right.
When was the penny drop moment for you? You qualified as a lawyer. Why didn't you end up pursuing that? Something happened.
Yeah, so when I was in grade school, I began working at Indian weddings. I played a drum called the dhol. It's a Punjabi drum. That's where my family is from in India. And I used to play this drum at weddings. Now, my parents didn't like that I did this because anything that was not math or science was like, you don't do this. So I had to play this drum in secret. But I played at weddings, and I started to make a little bit of money. And by a little bit of money, I mean $50 per wedding when I was in middle school, then maybe $100, $200 in high school. And one of the DJs that I was working with said, Jasprit, you know a lot of kids in high school. How about we host a teen party for some of these kids in your school? I was like, okay, well, why not? So we hosted this teen party, and it was a big success. And at the end of the night, the DJ then starts paying out all the costs because we were going to go in 50-50 on this business venture. And then we pay out the money for the security, for the venue, for the marketing. And then he says, all right, let's count our profits. And he has 4 bills in his hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 singles left. $2 for him, $2 for me. And I saw that we put in so much work into this business venture, into this idea, into this first party. And we made $4 of profit, which we split 50-50. And at that moment, he was really upset, but I was really not upset at all because I was like, this was fun. It was a lot of fun putting this together. But in my mind, it was just one of those hobbies that I was doing because I needed to become a doctor. Well, I did a few of those teen parties when I was in high school, and now it was time for me to go to college. I was 17 years old, and I get there, and I see everybody partying, drinking, blowing money they don't have. And I was shocked. I had no idea that people went to college to party. And I had no idea people got the money to spend money on all this alcohol. I don't drink. I'm not into party. But now I needed something to do on Friday nights. And so now I'm thinking, what do I do? How about I take this teen party business concept that I had in high school and now do it in college? So I was 17, and I started knocking on the doors of all the bars, venues, restaurants, trying to see if anybody would let me host a party there. And in the beginning, some said, sure, you can host a party here. We just need a $10,000 deposit. I don't have $10,000. I was 17 years old. So I kept going. Some said I need a $20,000 deposit. But eventually I found this one club that said, yeah, you can host a party here. You don't got to pay us anything. Just pay us half of the cover charge that you generate. Pay us 50% of whatever revenue you generate. Now I'm in business. I made the same arrangement with my DJ. I said, look, how about you DJ for me for free, and I'll split whatever profits I make with you. And that was the beginning of my first real business. It was this party promotion company, which then became an event planning company. And it grew pretty big in college. I mean, I started off by hosting these one-off parties. Then I was contracted by one of the largest clubs on campus to host their weekly college night. So I was hosting their parties every week. We were hosting official shows and after parties, and it grew pretty large. And now as this business starts to make money, the first thing that I realized is I don't need a license or a degree to make money. I thought that was something that I needed because I thought I needed these good grades to qualify for this thing to make money. So that was the first kind of shock and realization. The second realization that I had was I knew nothing about money. I was making a little bit of money, and I was very fortunate that I started reading books about money and business. And I started reading these books. And the first thing I learned was the difference between an asset and a liability, which were things I had never heard of before. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Wealthy people want to own assets. I was buying a whole lot of liabilities because I was working in this party promotion business and I wanted to look the part. So I would make a little bit of money, buy a nice watch, make a little bit more money, put some new rims on my car, put a new sound system in my car, put a new subwoofer in my car. I mean, I was blowing money on all these dumb things to look like I was rich. But in reality, I was just making a lot of other people rich. And then I learned about this thing called investing, which really started to upset me because I thought I was doing everything right. And I'm reading these books that are talking about how every wealthy person invests in real estate. I have no idea what that means. Nobody in my family is a real estate investor. I had never heard of this concept of real estate investing before. I don't know what it is, but if wealthy people are real estate investors and I want to become wealthy, maybe I should invest in real estate. So when I was 19, I'm now studying to get into medical school because I still think that I'm going to become a doctor. And I was bored out of my mind because I would spend all day, 10 to 12 hours a day in the library studying. And this was around 2011. And the reason why I say the year is because if you remember, 2008 was the great financial crisis. That was when we had the real estate collapse in America. So real estate prices were decimated and it didn't hit rock bottom until 2012. That's why I'm saying this. So in 2011, I'm studying to take the medical college admission test, the MCAT. And I'm reading these books talking about how wealthy people invest in real estate. And now I'm making a little bit of money from this party business and have a little bit of cash in the bank. So during my breaks, when I'm studying for the test, I start looking on the internet websites of finance. And they all talk about how real estate prices have hit rock bottom, how real estate is being decimated in America. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll start looking to buy real estate. And so on August 22nd, I took the medical college admission test. And then on August 23rd, I purchased my first real estate investment property. It was a small condo that I purchased out of foreclosure. A few years prior, it had sold for a little bit over $150,000. And then like many properties, it went through foreclosure. The banks couldn't sell it. And it was listed on sale for $8,400. That was the total price of the condo. So I came in with an offer of $4,000 because I don't know how this real estate investing stuff works. And we went back and forth with the bank. The bank said, we'll sell it to you for $7,000. I tried to negotiate them even lower. And then the bank said that they had another offer on the table. So now it's a bidding war. And I had to offer my highest and best price. So I said, I'm willing to offer $8,000 to buy the condo, no more. And they accepted my bid. So I purchased this condo for $8,000. I put in a few $1,000s worth of work. And then I rented it out for $600 a month. And now I start to question things. Why did nobody tell me about this? This condo is putting money into my pocket without me having to do something because I own this asset. We're all taught to trade our time for dollars. We're all taught to work to get paid because that's what we're taught to do. But wealthy people are not working for a bigger salary. They're working for more assets because that can continue to pay you even when you're not working. And that's that shift. When I saw that really sparked a fire under me and really made me angry. And I don't know why I got so angry, but I got angry because I felt like I was checking all the boxes. I was doing good in school. I bust my butt in school. I was going to do all the right things, become a doctor, and do everything that I was told. But what I didn't realize is those boxes weren't my boxes. Who created these boxes? And why is there this whole world of financial education that we're never taught? Because if this is how wealthy people build and grow their wealth, why is everybody else not taught this?
So I want to make a distinction here. Are you saying that in order to build wealth, people should buy a house?
No. If you want to build wealth, you have to buy assets. When people say buy a house, what does that mean to most people's eyes? It means buy my home.
Yeah.
I want to buy this nice place for me to live.
Which is what most people do when they get a bit of money. They take their salary from work and then they go and buy a house to live in, and then they pay into the mortgage, which means that they are now building an asset, right?
They're building what many people call generational wealth, which is one of the biggest lies when it comes to money. The reason why is because your house is actually a money pit. And that's why I want you to think of your house as a liability. But I want you to hear me clearly. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy a house. I'm not saying it's bad to buy a house. You have to treat your house like a liability. This suit that I'm wearing is a liability. This watch is a liability. My shoes are liabilities. Should I not buy them? No. I gotta make sure I can afford them. So when people think about buying a house, what do they think of? They think, I'm gonna build generational wealth. I'm gonna build wealth, I'm gonna pay it off, and I'm gonna be able to have more freedom in my life because I can own this house. Let's go with the best case scenario. You buy a home for, let's call it $300,000. You pay it off. And throughout your lifetime, this $300,000 home grows in value to $1 million. And now you're gonna say, Jaspreet, I've showed you this is an asset. My house tripled in value, more than tripled in value, and now I'm gonna pass it down to my kids. So now, yeah, your kid's got $1 million house, but unless they have the income to support paying for $1 million house, they might have to find some more cash. Now what do? Because you can't just pull cash out of this house, right? I mean, it's not an ATM unless you go to the bank. The bank will give you the cash because the bank says, oh, you have $1 million house. How about we loan you $800,000? But that's not an ATM because you have to pay that money back plus interest. And now unless your kids have the income to pay for the property tax, to pay for the insurance, to pay for the upgrades, to pay for the maintenance and the mortgage, they can't afford that house. So maybe now they have to sell. Okay, now you sell it. You got $1 million. Great, we're not even gonna talk about taxes right now. But you got $1 million. You're rich. But if they don't have any financial education and you have $1 million, what's gonna happen? Well, let's think about this. If you had $1 million, what would you do with it? If I went down the street and I asked the average person, if I wrote you a check for $1 million today, what would you do? What are people gonna say? I'm gonna go to the Bahamas. I'm gonna buy myself a nice house, I'm gonna buy myself a nice car, buy myself some nice clothes, go to the Gucci store, go to the Louis Vuitton store, and buy myself the extra guac at Chipotle. That's what the average person will do. Now maybe you're a little bit more financially smart. You say, I'm just gonna live off of $50,000 a year. But after 20 years, you have nothing left. Not to mention the fact that 10 years from now, that $50,000 a year lifestyle is gonna buy you half of what it can today. So now let's go back to that situation. You thought you built generational wealth. You did a good thing about paying off the mortgage because you don't have to pay the mortgage payment. But is that really the type of generational wealth that you want? And now to fully hammer this home, I'm not saying it's bad to own a house. It's actually very great. It's an amazing thing to own your house free and clear because now you can rest assured, you don't have to worry about the mortgage payments. If you have the financial education, that's great. But let's talk about now the real way to do this and build true wealth. When I buy my real estate investment properties and my property values go up, the rental values also go up. The rent is what pays for the maintenance. The rent is what pays for the upgrades. The rent is what's paying for the property taxes and the insurance. The rent is putting money in my pocket. And this is cash flow that I can use. I can use this cash flow to buy a vacation. I can use this cash flow to buy food. I can use this cash flow to pay for my lifestyle. But your house doesn't do that. You have to pay to live in your house.
But people think, they're getting their mortgage payments, they're spending whatever they are, spending on their mortgage payments. They think we're kind of told that mortgage payment is an investment into an asset.
Your mortgage payment is a payment to your bank. Banks are not stupid. In fact, they're very smart. Banks do something called front-loading your mortgage. What that means is if you go out and get a 30-year mortgage, which is what many people do in America, and you pay $3,000 a month on your mortgage, you're not paying $1,500 to your interest, your bank, and $1,500 to your principal, your equity. The way it works is banks front-load your mortgage, which means for the first almost 15 years, it's about 14 years and 8 months or so, but for almost 15 years of your mortgage, the first 15 years, the majority of your mortgage payment is going directly into your banker's pocket in the form of interest. Which means if you're paying $3,000 a month on your mortgage, for the first part of your mortgage, maybe $100 is going out of the $3,000 into your equity. The other $2,900 is going right into your banker's pocket with interest. And now, after 15 years, now half of your mortgage payment is going to your equity and half is going to interest. But if you refinance before that 15-year mark, that starts over. And so this is where banks understand the game. Again, I'm not against buying a house, but you got to understand the game of money. And most people don't understand that. And so the mistake that people make is they buy a house they can't afford, and now they're paying all this money into their mortgage, thinking that I'm building wealth. They no longer have money to save. They no longer have money to invest into other real assets. And their money is just going to pay down the mortgage, thinking that this is going to build my wealth, but you've been sold a lie.
This term opportunity cost. Most people don't know what this term opportunity cost means, but it appears to be very pertinent to what you're saying, especially when you just said this is money that you can't then invest in assets. Can you explain what opportunity cost is and how it's impacted if you buy a house?
Sure. If you have, let's make the numbers very simple. You want to buy a $100,000 home, and let's say the banks require a 20% down payment, $20,000. You can do a few things. Number one, you can take that $20,000 and go out and buy this house. And now that's how that money has been used. But if you use that money to buy the house, you lose the opportunity to take that $20,000 and say, use it to buy a rental property. You lose the opportunity to use that $20,000 to invest in the stock market. You lose the opportunity to take that $20,000 and maybe build a business. Now the question is, what is going to give you the best and most growth? Now, hopefully this house that you buy will go up in value. It's not guaranteed. We know that houses don't always go up in value, no matter what your banker says, no matter what your real estate agent says, because we saw what happened after the 2008 crash, where real estate prices were slashed in half. It was as much as 93% real estate values dropping in the state of Michigan, where I am. So we know real estate prices don't always go up. Stock prices don't always go up. Businesses don't always work. Everything has a risk. But now the question is, which risk do you want to take? And which risk do you want to take first? Are you in a situation now where you're ready to go out and buy a house? Or do you want to build your wealth first, a little bit more? And that's the question that I want people to start thinking is, am I ready to buy a house? And then people say, well, if I go out and invest my money, the problem is housing prices keep going up. I'm chasing this housing market. It keeps getting more and more and more expensive. And you're 100% right. It's a risk. But there's also a risk the housing prices could fall.
I think one of the biases that makes people want to buy a house is that they're currently renting and they see that as just giving money away. So they think, listen, I could spend this money on a mortgage and I'll own this thing one day, or I could spend this same $2,000 or whatever it is on rent and I'm never going to own this thing.
Well, I'm here in Los Angeles right now. I had to stay in a hotel. That hotel payment is paying somebody's mortgage. It's paying somebody's college tuition. It's paying for somebody's stuff. When I go to a restaurant and I eat out, I'm paying for somebody's mortgage. I'm paying for somebody's college tuition. I'm paying for somebody's bills. Because when you go out and you rent, that's what everybody says. I am making my landlord rich. But when you eat at a restaurant, you're making that restaurant owner rich. When you go to a hotel, you're making the hotel owner rich. When I go and buy a mug, I'm making the mug owner rich. And the reality is, yeah, it's good for you to own a house. But are you ready to own a house? Can you afford to own a house? And what do you want to own first? I rent where I live right now. I am making my landlord rich today. I also rent where my office is. I am making my office landlord very rich because my office rent is very expensive. Do you feel bad for me? I hope not. And this is where we have to get over these money myths that many people keep selling you, that you can't build wealth if you rent where you live. You can't build wealth if you don't get a good degree. That's not the way that the system works. See, there's the traditional rules and then there's the real financial education money rules. And again, I'm not saying it's bad to own a house, but it's bad to own a house you can't afford.
How do you know if you can afford one?
Well, there's three parts to afford a house. You have to afford the down payment, you have to afford the monthly payment, and you have to afford the moving costs. I'm gonna go start from the simplest one, which is the moving costs, because many people don't factor this in. When you buy a house, you gotta move in. And I'm not talking about the closing costs. You might have to hire movers, which are expensive. You might have to upgrade your furniture, which is expensive. You might have to upgrade the house, which is expensive. Factor that in. Then I want to talk about your down payment. People don't like when I say this, but I don't say what I say to make friends. I say what I say to help people be better with money. If you want to afford the house, you have to have at least a 20% down payment. That way you actually have some equity, some skin in the game. That way you can actually afford the house. The third part is you have to afford the monthly payments. Now, every bank is going to have a different rule for you. Banks have like the 28% rule and these other ruals.
Sorry, just on that last point, why do people not like it when you say that?
Because it's very hard to pay a 20% down payment. Housing is expensive. You want to buy a $500,000 house? You have to have $100,000 as a minimum for your down payment.
Okay.
And that's extra cash.
Great.
Now, if we talk about the monthly costs, the simple way that I like to follow it is you have to have a system for yourself. You have to know how much money you are allowed to spend, how much money you need to be investing, and how much money you have to be saving every single month. Then, just factor it in. So, the way I like to look at it, a simple rule of thumb is something like a 75, 15, 10 plan, which says for every dollar that you earn from here on out, 75 cents is the maximum that you can spend. 15 cents is the minimum that you invest. 10 cents is the minimum that you save. Now, let's do the math. If you know that you make, let's call it $100,000 a year, that means the max you can spend out of the $100,000 is $75,000. So if out of that $75,000, you can afford your mortgage costs, you can afford your food, you can afford your vacations and lifestyle, then sure, you can afford it. But if you can't afford that, then you can't afford that mortgage. And the reason why I like to go by this rule is because some people are going to say, I can live in a small house, I just want an expensive car and some nice vacations. Other people are going to say, I want a beautiful home. I don't care about the car and vacations. So now you can factor it all in there. How much can you afford out of that 75% of what you make?
Do you think people even know how much money they spend?
No.
I was thinking, I wonder how many people listening right now know over the last 6 months the exact figure that they spend every single month.
Most people, statistically, are living paycheck to paycheck.
So they're basically spending everything?
Or more.
Okay.
78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, which means I make some money and I spend all of it or more. There's a joke that I like to make, which is in the traditional Indian culture, people make $1 to spend 20 cents. In the traditional American culture, people make $1 to spend $2 through the help of lines of credit, credit cards, and other forms of debt. And the reason why, I'm going to take it a step back. I don't think you wanted me to go this way, but I'm going to go anywhere. Anyway, we live in what's called a credit-based economy, which means if you make $50,000 a year, you don't live off of $50,000 a year. At least most Americans don't.
Smaller than the diagram.
We live in what's called a credit-based economy, which means you have the ability to spend the $50,000 you earn plus debt. Because as you make more money, as you have a good job, you become more creditworthy. And so as you show the bank, hey, I made $50,000, they'll give you credit cards, they'll give you lines of credit, they'll give you whatever types of debt that they can. That way now you can go out and spend $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, because that's what grows the economy. The more money you spend, the richer somebody else gets. And so now when you live in this credit-based economy with no financial education, people spend, the economy grows, and most people have no idea what hit them.
Do you know what's really interesting is 2 days ago, I was having a conversation with one of my friends. It was actually, I did a podcast about finance recently, and in there I mentioned some of my friends, and then they messaged me on WhatsApp and we were having a chat in our group chat. And I, for the first time ever, one of them asked me to guess. We're very close friends. We talk about money, we talk about how much money we have, etc. They said, guess who has the most money in the group. So I went through and I did, I think this is this person's net worth of my 5 best friends. And I think this is how much cash they have. Now, one of my friends who is very, what's the word? I guess frugal. Lives a very, very simple life. as I was going through, I go, do you know what? This friend is this like high-flying guy, lives in this amazing apartment. This person has all these wonderful things. This person's been successful in business. This person's successful in crypto. But you know what? I bet my mate, and I won't say his name, I bet he's richer than everyone else in that chat. All of my other friends in the chat. And so I did my little prediction and I said, I bet you've got X figure. And he replied and said, this is my current cash position. He was richer than everyone in the chat in terms of cash combined. This guy lives so free. He lives in like a studio apartment. He never balls. He doesn't have like a fancy car, doesn't have fancy clothes. And he's richer than the entire lot of my friendship group. And I thought, God, there's something really important here in terms of, and it's so crazy if you know the context of what I'm saying, because I've got a friend in that chat who's built like a big business. I've got a friend, like everyone in that chat runs businesses, is successful, but they're living in different ways. And the one friend who runs the smallest business, who like probably has the least income, is the richest. And over the last couple of days, it's so funny. I was thinking about all the dinners I've bought this fucking guy, and I'm like, I didn't know you were a millionaire. I would have been paid for everything.
But this is really, I mean, if we ignore your friends, it's very easy to look fake rich.
Yeah.
Because everybody will give you a line of credit. If I want a Gucci purse and I can't afford the Gucci, guess what? I can buy now, pay later. I can open up a credit card and buy the Gucci and look like I'm rich. When in reality, I'm just making Gucci rich. In fact, one of the richest people in the world, in 2023, he was the richest person in the world, is Bernard Arnault. He's the founder and CEO of LVM, or he's the founder and CEO of the company that owns Louis Vuitton. And why? Because millions of people pay him to look rich, when in reality, he's the one that's getting rich. And we assume that when you make some more money, you gotta start looking the part. And this is that mindset shift that we have to make. And, you know, a lot of people resonate who come from the Indian traditional families. They messaged me saying, Jasprit, I became a doctor, or my wife and I are doctors. We make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. We make a great income, but we have no savings and no investments, and I don't know what to do. And the reason why is we have a Range Rover and a Benz. We have a nice house. We go on the doctor vacations. We have to look the part. But we don't have any money left over at the end of our paychecks. And it's a very easy thing to get caught up in, because when you make more money, you become more creditworthy. Banks will give you bigger loans. When you make more money, you want to spend more money. And it's very easy. And you have to understand, how do you control that spending? And that's why if you follow something like 75, 15, 10, one of the simplest things you can do to start is just always, no matter what, whether you're making $10,000 a year or $10 million a year, you always put money aside to invest, you always put money aside to save, and you spend whatever's left.
My friend doesn't invest. The friend I'm talking about doesn't actually invest. He just doesn't spend. He just doesn't spend money. And he's just stacked up like $1 million in cash whilst earning less than everyone else of my 5 friends in that chat. And it didn't take a long time. Like, it took him 4 years or something, 4 or 5 years of just running this small business with a couple of people. When I say a small business, I mean a really, like a small business, like a business of maybe 4 or 5 employees. And he's built up $1 million in cash for himself because he just doesn't spend money. And he doesn't have like an ego, doesn't care what people think of him. Yet my other friends who are earning maybe 5 times more a month have 5 times less cash than him. It was so inspiring. It was honestly so inspiring, because it says something about the importance of saving. But who the hell wants to save? If I titled this podcast today something about saving, no one's going to click.
It's not fun. Saving isn't exciting. Who wants to go out and save $2,000? Who wants to spend less money? We want to buy more nice things. But unless you can control the spending, unless you know how to save, you will never build wealth.
Do you know, for people that are in that paycheck to paycheck cycle, which I was in for many, many years of my life, where I'd get paid for my call center, I'd go and spend the money, and I'd pretty much spend all the money within the first couple of days of getting the paycheck, and I was just waiting the next 3 weeks for the next paycheck. What advice would you give them about getting out of that cycle? Because you almost feel imprisoned by that cycle if you're
Absolutely.
in it.
Well, before I give the advice, I want to explain to that person what's happening. because you are the prime customer for our economic system. Banks love you because they can sell you payday loans, they can sell you credit cards, they can sell you lines of credit, and they can keep you in debt for the rest of your life, which means you keep making the bank rich. Corporations love you because you're not going to think twice when we show you this nice bag, when we show you this nice vacation. You're going to want the stuff, and so we love selling you the stuff. The government loves you because you're going to pay the highest taxes. Employees pay the highest taxes. And so when you're in that situation, you are making everybody else rich at your expense. And so if you want to break out of this, the first thing is you got to understand, you need to make yourself rich before you make everybody else rich. Because when you're spending all your money, you are putting your money into their pockets. And you have to stop that. You got to keep that money for yourself. You're in a boat. Think of it this way, you're in a boat. And this boat has water just flowing in, and you are sinking. And you got to start by sealing the holes. You got to stop the water leaving. You got to stop the water coming in. You got to stop the bleeding. And that means you got to stop the spending. So, if you are in what I call the financial danger zone, which is you don't have $2,000 saved up for an emergency,